Hello everyone and welcome back. I have something cool I would like to share with you this time, and it is the new reissue by Sony of the original score, Elmer Bernstein's score to Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters that is. The reason why I'm kind of talking about this right now is I just came from the Ghostbusters Fan Fest this past weekend at Sony Picture Studios, and I had a great time. Met a lot of the cast members, got some autographs, took some photos, met some fellow fans, etc. And I just wanted to kind of briefly talk about this new CD release. So I'm just going to jump right into it. So just a quick little history about it. Until maybe about 2006-ish, the score was never ever released. So pretty much from 1984 all the way until 2006, there was no CD release of the score of any kind, with the exception of the two tracks that were on the original soundtrack album, which I believe were Dana's theme and the Ghostbusters theme. Kind of bookended the presentation of the songs on that album. And that's pretty much all there was for 20 years, at least 20 years, until 2006. And back then, it was released on the Varèse Sarabande label, and as part of their CD club. And basically their CD club, it's not necessarily a club in a literal sense, it's just like a grouping, I guess a name to categorize limited edition CD releases of classic film scores, things like that. And basically these are all expanded editions, sometimes things that were never released before, etc., etc. Well, anyway, back in 2006, as I said, Varèse released this limited edition release of the Ghostbusters score. It was limited to 3,000 copies, and from what I understand, this thing sold out very quickly. In fact, I didn't even hear about it because I just was busy with life at the time. I didn't really hear about it until much, much later. In fact, I had gotten my hands on the digital files at the time, later on. And it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4, 5, 6 years later that I actually got my hands on the actual CD. And that's because a friend of mine who was out here visiting at the time happened to have a brand new spare sealed copy of it. And that's how I was able to get it. But yeah, and as you can see, the Varèse has a kind of a nice cover. Of course, it has the signature logo of the Varèse Club with the no ghost thing kind of slashing through the symbol, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. And taking the CD out, you'll see the image of the Ecto-1, but I just put my ticket stubs in here for every time I've seen Ghostbusters in the theaters within recent memory. So that's that. And yeah, there's a booklet here, of course, and mine is signed by Ivan Reitman and of course Dan Aykroyd. But yeah, so there's a little booklet here, and you get a little history about it, talks about it, Elmer Bernstein, of course the score, the film, etc., with some images in there. So yeah, and so this thing had disappeared and very quickly became a highly prized, sought after collectible by not only film music and soundtrack buffs like myself, but also, well, for Ghostbusters fans like myself. And yeah, and up until maybe just a few days ago, this thing was going for a hefty penny on eBay. Not because I was selling it, but because I've seen other posts. So yeah, and then suddenly, Sony decided to reissue the score themselves. Now, there are a couple of indie labels like La La Land Records and Entrada, etc., and even Varèse themselves may have tried to release or reissue the score over the years between 2006 and now, to no avail. I believe further attempts were made during the Answer the Call film time, which was like 2016, but again, it never went anywhere. And so now here we are, the 35th anniversary of the original film, and there is a new release of the score. Now, I do want to point out that this is not limited edition. You can get it on Amazon. It would run you about $12, $13 in comparison to this, which at the time was like probably 20 or more. So again, it's not limited edition, and it has been remastered. From what I've listened to so far, it does sound slightly better than the Varèse version. But I will say that aside from the obvious packaging, the biggest difference would be the track names. So I'll just put the two side by side so you can kind of take a look. So right off the bat, you'll notice that the two different covers. Personally, I prefer the Varèse one because I love presentation when it comes to things like this. But when you flip it over and look at the track listing, that's when things really get interesting. So here's the track listing for the Varèse one. If I can just get the bloody camera to do it. Hold on, let me turn off the light, that might help. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Anyhow, there's a track listing there, and for a total of 39 tracks, and has all the credit information down there, and of course it says limited collector's edition of 3,000 units, 3,000 copies. And so yeah, now this one on the other hand, which just came out a few days ago, is pretty simple. You can see it has the has the No Ghost logo there, and it basically replicates the original soundtrack album cover, only this time it says original motion picture score and music by Elmer Bernstein. And this sticker was actually on the plastic, but I peeled it off just for the sake of it, I guess. But yeah, and here's the back with this track listing, which is slightly different, so please feel free to press pause on this thing. And other people have pointed out that the new Ghostbusters imagery that started coming out in recent years has seen alterations to those images, probably because Sony didn't want to be sued for something. And a prime example is, you'll notice on the Ecto-1 coming out of the firehouse there, the Cadillac symbol is curiously missing. Everybody knows it's a Cadillac. It's always been that way, and but I guess to avoid any rights or anything like that, they just omitted the symbol, which to me doesn't make much sense because it's obvious it's a Cadillac. Everybody knows that. So yeah, so you open up the disc, right? Ooh, mine almost fell out. But you open up the disc, and it kind of has that image there, which are more of the stock images, production images, promotional shots from the film that everybody has seen. And you take the disc out, and unlike the Varèse with the Ecto-1 in there, you have Stay Puft doing a stretch before climbing Central Park West building. And of course, the liner notes come out. If I can get it out. And there's the image again, and you open it up, and you just have the track listing repeated with some imagery from the film, and there's some stuff in here, so I didn't realize this was in here before. And then you turn the page, and you get more imagery from the film, and more imagery from the film. The Cadillac symbol is missing again. More imagery from the film, and more imagery from the film along with the musicians list. I guess that's part of the union contract from the orchestra. They have to have all their names included, and there's a symbol of the union down there. And finally, the album producing credits, etc., with a final shot of Gozer there before closing out the booklet. Now, for the most part, with the exception of maybe 2 pages in this entire booklet, the rest are all images from the movie. Whereas the Varèse one, from almost page 1 to the end, has all text in it for the most part. This kind of gives you like a real huge history of it. Unfortunately, the one thing that neither disc does is give you a track-by-track analysis so that you can kind of understand what you're listening to. And the Ghostbusters score is, well, it was heavily edited in the film. A lot of cues were kind of tossed around, cut and pasted in places where they weren't composed for. So anybody listening to either version, same score, but anybody listening to the score will tell you that, hey, I don't remember that part, or I don't remember that being in the movie. There's a lot of that. That was my first experience when I first listened to it. And the reason is, like I said, because they cut it up. Pieces were moved, altered, edited, whatever the scenario was. And so, yeah. And so these albums, both of them, have a lot of material that ultimately went unused because a lot of those scenes had songs in them that were replaced scenes with scores. Like Saving the Day, that was scored. The beginning after the library ghost, that was all scored before it cut to the Ray Parker Jr. song, and so on. And so there's a lot of material on here, again, that was composed for those scenes and recorded, obviously, but were never heard because the songs replaced them. And so anyway, that's just that. But it's an interesting listening experience. It's one of my favorite scores by Elmer Bernstein. It probably is my favorite score by him. And the score does hold a kind of like a personal place in my heart, obviously because it's Ghostbusters. But you really have to like listen to it to kind of understand. And it's one of those things where, oh, and the one thing I want to point out too is that, and both albums were guilty of this, and I don't know why they did it this way, but I think it might be because they just wanted to have what's called a listening experience, instead of what people like me like to have the chronological order. I want to hear it. I want to hear a film score from the first second until the end of the end credits in chronological order. You know, I don't want to hear, you know, cues from the beginning of the film tucked in at the end, in the middle, or vice versa. I want it from the beginning to the end, the way it was, and the way it was in the film, the way I heard it the first time. And so, for some reason, both of these suffer from that same thing. Cues like the ballroom, which is here. Let's see what else is in here. The trap, that's also from the ballroom, which I believe on the Varese version, that cue was merged with something else. I believe, let's see. No, actually it wasn't. On the Varese version, it was called Halls, and then the preceding track, or the following track was Trap. And then on this one, it was pushed further on in the track list, and it was called Halls, Ballroom, and then Trap. So they basically split a cue into two and moved it further into the program. And a few of the track names have been renamed. That's another big difference between the Sony reissue and the original Varese version. And one of the things that was corrected, which I noticed, is that on the Varese version, Zool was spelled Z-O-O-L, and on the Sony one, it's spelled correctly, Z-U-U-L. Yeah, so the other thing is the Varese version has 39 tracks, as I mentioned, and this one has 37. So I think a couple of things may have been omitted, and that may annoy some people. And but according to the sticker, it said that there are 4 unreleased tracks, and I can tell you right off the bat which one, at least one of them, that was not on the Varese version, and that is the Steel Drum, which is track 20. Now, if somebody can find this out and correct me, I'd be very grateful. But Steel Drum basically, I think, is the cue that was playing at the club or the dinner when Louis Tully, before he got possessed by the terror dog. I could be wrong there, but I just don't remember it in the film. So if somebody can refresh the memory or correct me if I'm wrong, that'd be great. But yeah, that's definitely not on the Varese version. And a couple of other things as well. And you just kind of have to kind of dig around and find them. And so also, like, the sound has been tweaked a little bit. The bass has kind of been turned down on this one versus this. The brightness on this has been toned down here as well. So there are some subtle differences. But of course, the biggest difference, obviously, is the physical presentation of the CDs themselves and the way they're packaged. And the content is, for the most part, the same, but yet different. So, and you also have to remember that this was a limited edition and this is not. So anybody can go online or someplace and buy this and not have to spend all kinds of money for it. And basically, it almost devaluates this or invalidates this, but at the same time it doesn't, because as I said earlier, for myself, I love presentation, and this thing looks great. My only beef with it, obviously, is that it's only got 3 of the Ghostbusters and not all 4 with Winston. But that's a whole other topic. So this is pretty basic. It just has the symbol and you have the track listing, and then you get bare boned liner notes with 2 pages of probably talking about the reissue and all of that. And so that's that. Maybe something to hype up the new movie coming out in next year. So it's good. If you're a Ghostbusters fan, definitely run out and pick this up. I'm also hoping that if enough people buy this, it will tell Sony that there's really demand for the Ghostbusters score, which will in turn maybe make them release Randy Edelman's score to Ghostbusters 2. I happen to like the score to Ghostbusters 2. In fact, I have the score. It was given to me by the composer himself at a fan event several years ago on a CDR that I asked him to sign on top for me. And many people have asked me for it. And it's one of those things where I kind of said I wouldn't give it out. And but it's fun to listen to. And unfortunately, I wish I could share that with the community, but I can't. So I'm hoping that maybe if people buy this and really get the interest out there and show Sony by the numbers, that is, it might tell them, hey, let's just do 2 as well. But who knows, that might already actually be in the works, because as far as I know, no one I knew saw this coming. So it just kind of popped up randomly on, I think at first on Sony Canada, on Amazon Canada. And then eventually it kind of worked its way onto other sites. And I believe I saw on Amazon that there's a vinyl release for this as well. So you have a couple of options. Actually, you can get the CD, you can go on Amazon to get the vinyl, or you can go on iTunes or Spotify or whatever method you choose and get the digital file of that as well if CDs aren't your thing. So anyway, I hope I've shed a little bit of light on this. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. But I do highly recommend you picking it up. If you don't already have this, definitely pick this up if you're interested. I also want to point out that if you have this, keep it. Don't get rid of it. Keep it, because it's better. It's a better presentation than this. This is basic. It gives you exactly what you need, which is the score. You get a few words about it, and then that's it. There's nothing limited about it. It's easy. It costs you under $20, and this one probably would cost you way more than $20. So, but if you have it, keep it. If you're a completist, you're gonna have both, like me. So yeah, thanks for watching. Again, if there's anything I can answer or have any questions about it, please feel free to ask me, and I'll get back to you. So until next time, guys, who are you gonna call?